Let's head on over to Pisa. Now, Pisa, if you remember, was one of the contenders for power in the Italian peninsula. It was experiencing a lot of prosperity in land and sea trade, banking, manufacturing, textiles, and arms. It was a prosperous city, and it was fighting for control over the peninsula with Florence and Siena and Oviedo, right? Here's a map of Pisa. So one of the major rivers through the Italian peninsula is the Arno, and here it travels through the city. And we're going to go up to this corner where the main cathedral is located. Here we are. This is the cathedral complex in Pisa. Now, I call it a cathedral complex because in Italian cathedrals, it is not unusual for there to be 3 buildings. And I mentioned this before with Florence. I mentioned that there were 3 elements within a typical Italian cathedral complex. So let me label them for you here. It'd be more helpful. Here they are. The 3 are the central or the main building, which is the sanctuary, the church. And then the tall element is the bell tower. And then usually standing in front of the church itself is the baptistry. The baptistry is a separate building that is used for baptisms. You hear it in the name itself, baptistry, baptisms. And the baptistry ceremony is performed within this space and is an official welcome for those into the Christian church. Those who have not yet been baptized also will receive Mass, hear the word of the Bible within the baptistry rather than the main church sanctuary. So we see the complex here at Pisa. And at the time that construction began, Pisa was rolling in dough. So much money because they had just won some key battles against their rival cities. And with all this money, they thought, what should we do? We should spend it on our cathedral complex. And they started with the church and the baptistry and then the bell tower, and they were lining it in the most expensive material, white marble. Oh, it was just to show off all of their power, all of their wealth. Now, I mention this because you might be noticing this bell tower is kind of leaning. You know what that is? Yes! It's the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Did you know that the Leaning Tower of Pisa was the bell tower to the cathedral? Well, now you know. Now, remember what I said, that construction was to show off with all of these expensive materials, like that really heavy white marble. Now, as the story goes with the bell tower, they started construction, and as they added more levels and the building got heavier, the foundation started to falter. And almost immediately after completion, it started to lean. Now, you might think, well, why didn't they just fix it? By the time construction was completed and they noticed the lean, they didn't have any money, or they didn't have enough money to fix it. They had lost a few key battles with their enemies, their rivals. And so they just kind of were like, we'll fix it when we get some more money. And then it kept on leaning and it kept on leaning. And it eventually became like a huge tourist attraction. So let me show you another view of it. Isn't that beautiful? Here is one of my former students, Michael, and he was at the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Now, I want you to go to the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and I want you to do something crazy. People get really creative. You can see here that they're playing with perspective. Look at these cheerleaders doing this stunt. This woman here tipping it over. Now, you can be really meta, and you can take a picture of people taking pictures with the Leaning Tower of Pisa if you want to. That would be awesome too. Now, we're not here to talk about the Leaning Tower of Pisa. I'm sorry. I mention it, but let's go to the other side of the complex. We're going to go and look at an artwork that's in the baptistry, okay? So let's head on over there. Here, look at this detail. The beautiful stonework. Do you see elements of the Italian Gothic? We have those pointed gables. We have this emphasis on height, or the vertical emphasis, right? The elaborate stonework. Let's go inside. So here we are looking down into the space. In the center is the baptismal font, or the holy water that would be used for the baptism. We're going to look at this platform right next to the area. So here we were, there's the fountain, and we're going to stand and look at this structure. So this is your official artwork title. The artist is Nicola Pisano, and what we're looking at here is the pulpit of the baptistry in Pisa. So really it's just a description, right? Pulpit is this large raised platform, and it is used by priests as a way to physically project your voice out and over a crowd. Remember, this is before microphones, and so if this space is filled with people, even if they're trying to be quiet, it can be really loud, right? People shuffling around, baby crying. And so a pulpit is a raised platform for the priest to conduct the ceremony. So we can imagine that the figure would be standing in here. The panels that surround the pulpit are carved out of marble and inset. We're going to look at the panels. They show depictions from the life of Christ. Oh, and then look at this. So we have these gorgeous columns that come down, and then 6 columns. 3 of the columns rest on the backs of these lions. Now the lions pace in this circle around the pulpit. Think about the fact that lions are these big, intimidating creatures. And then look at their mouths. Their mouths are open, right? So you can imagine them going kind of panting. Also, at this time, in the medieval world, people in Europe believed that lions slept with their eyes open. I know it seems impractical, but they did, and therefore lions were seen as symbols of guardianship, that their eyes are always open, ever watchful, ever on guard. So we can imagine these lions pacing underneath, panting, and they are on guard. They're guarding the sacredity of this moment, of this baptistry. So now we're not going to look at all the panels. Instead, we're going to be looking at a single panel. We're going to look at this one here. So notice the title. So we know the artist is Nicola Pisano. Oh, which by the way, Nicola Pisano, his name is Nicola, and he's from Pisa. Pisano means a man from Pisa. So Nicola, the man from Pisa. And in this panel, what we see is the Annunciation, the Nativity, and the Adoration of the Shepherds. So what we see are 3 elements, or 3 moments from the life of Christ, and they've been compressed into one panel. Again, think of this like a comic book where 3 different times are happening within one space. This here is the moment in which the Archangel Gabriel announces to the Virgin Mary that she's pregnant with the Son of God. That's called the Annunciation. Here, let me help out with a little bit of drawing. Hold on one moment. So the Annunciation is back here. right? And then the nativity. The nativity. Nativity is the birth. And that is happening right here. And what we see is the Virgin Mary is resting after giving birth to Jesus, who is being attended to and given his first bath. Now, in this setting, I can't zoom in, but I will zoom in a little bit. And then the final element is the adoration of the shepherds. And that's taking place right here. Now, within the story of the life of Christ, the adoration is when the shepherds adore or look over at the baby Jesus. So there are the shepherds in adoration, annunciation, and the nativity. Now I can zoom in. So we see the Virgin Mary 2 times. It's not that she has a twin. It's just seeing her 2 times because of 2 different moments. Here we have the Annunciation. And then let's zoom in on the Nativity. So we have the Virgin Mary laying here resting, and then these 2 women are giving baby Jesus a bath. Now, I know what you're thinking. What happened to his head? Where's baby Jesus' head? It fell off. I know. A lot of artwork is going to be damaged. It's fragile, and these things kind of, fall apart sometimes. So Pisano had sculpted a full baby. It's just that those elements are now missing, just like her hand here. So I need you to use your imagination and add them back in. Same goes for the shepherds. Now you might be thinking, oh, somebody decapitated them, somebody took their heads off. It's more likely that because it is the thinnest point in that sculpture, it's an easy place to break off, to fracture, to fall off. Same with the hands, that those hands are tiny and small and so are more fragile and could, fall off. When we look at this in its totality, we see 3 scenes from the life of Christ. What we don't have is a lot of depth. It's densely packed. It's really, really tight in this space. Now, I know you're probably thinking, I don't get it, Ms. Cortez, what are you saying? Not only is it 3 scenes compressed into one space, but let's think about the use of depth. It's not really happening. Instead, what Pisano's done is he's given us these flat figures who stack up. So rather than sharing the same ground plane or even the same size, the figures are all compressed up front and there's very little movement back. Instead, there's movement up. It's similar to what we saw with Cimabue, right? Now, I mention this because as we get into the Renaissance, we're going to see this change. We're going to see more space, more depth. But this is part of the Proto-Renaissance or the Italian Gothic style. This kind of flat, compressed space. Also, the proportions of the figures. They're not quite right. They're accurate, but there's still a little bit too much length in the Virgin Mary's legs and the square of her shoulders. But artists like Pisano, they're trying to be more realistic. What he does give us is this beautiful drapery, and we have a great sense of the body underneath the fabric, right? So we are seeing a greater attention to the mass of the figure. Let's look at another side of the pulpit. So we were just here. We're going to look now at this figure. So what we have is a young male nude. And he's like super buff, right? Look at those pecs. On his shoulder, he has a lion cub. And then it looks as if he's holding perhaps a lion skin. Is that the head of the lion skin there? Or is he playing rough and tumble with another lion? he seems to be in control of the situation with these, ferocious beasts. So what is he doing here on this pulpit? He is representing one of the 7 Christian virtues, perhaps strength or fortitude. And that strength is expressed in this muscular male nude. Pisano is using an image of a young male nude that was prevalent or very popular, most often seen in ancient Greek and Roman art, like this statue here. Now, I'm not going to identify it for you right now. We'll talk about it later, but I want you to connect the visual elements of sculptures like this from the ancient Greek and ancient Roman world and how they are starting to come back in the late medieval period, in the Proto-Renaissance. Now, you're just going to have to take my word for it that, yes, this is something that's coming back, okay? So it was there, and then during the medieval period, artworks were less realistic, less attention to muscle, less attention to proportions. And now, in works like Pisano and Giotto, we're starting to see a return to the attention to detail, proportion, muscular, muscles, skeletal structure that we see in the ancient Greek and ancient Roman world. Got it? Now, with our last video today, we're going to talk about some of the reasons that scholars have identified for this transition or this rise of the Renaissance, the rise of humanism. And there are going to be historical and cultural and religious factors involved that will lead out of the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance.